Today we're diving into Everybody Lies by Seth Stevens Davidowitz, an absolutely fascinating book that pulls back the curtain on human behavior. Here's the crazy part. People may lie to surveys, to their friends, even to themselves, but they rarely lie to Google. And those private searches reveal the truth about who we really are. In this summary, you'll discover insights that might surprise you, shock you, and even make you laugh. You'll learn how data uncovers hidden prejudices, the real reasons behind our moods, what people secretly regret in life, and even how the internet can sometimes predict illness before doctors do. It's a journey into the raw, unfiltered side of human nature, the side most of us keep hidden. Stick with me until the end, because the lessons in this book will change the way you see people, the world, and maybe even yourself. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe to join Audiobook 101. This is where we break down the best books on success, wealth, mindset, productivity, and personal growth, so you can learn faster, grow smarter, and keep moving forward. All right, let's get started. Your Faulty Gut. At 33 years old, Seth Stevens Davidowitz, the author of this book, was still single. One Thanksgiving, his family gathered around the table and, as families often do, the conversation turned to his love life. His sister joked that he needed a quirky girl because, well, Seth himself was a little quirky. His brother interrupted, saying no, what Seth really needed was someone calm and sensible to balance him out. His mother jumped in quickly, defending him, insisting that her son wasn't crazy at all. Then finally, his grandmother spoke. Everyone fell silent, because she was the one whose judgment nobody dared question. She had lived long, seen relationships form and fall apart, and her words carried weight. She calmly said that Seth didn't need someone glamorous or overly beautiful. What he needed was a smart woman, someone warm, social, and with a good sense of humor. Because Seth himself was funny, but also a bit reserved, his grandmother believed he needed someone who could draw him out into the world. No one argued with her. After all, she was speaking from decades of observation, from patterns she had seen in real marriages. And in that way, she was doing exactly what data scientists do. She was collecting past experiences, analyzing patterns, and making predictions. This is where the big idea of everybody lies begins. Our instincts, our gut feelings, are often wrong. They're based on limited experiences and personal bias. Data, on the other hand, works like Seth's grandmother, but on a much bigger scale. Instead of a few relationships, it can examine millions of cases, compare patterns, and reveal truths that our own eyes and memories would never catch. Take medicine, for example. Researchers at Microsoft and Columbia University wanted to find a way to detect pancreatic cancer early. It's one of the deadliest diseases, with survival rates of just 3% if caught late. But if discovered earlier, survival chances could double. So how did they try to detect it? By studying search engine data. They found that when people were eventually diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, their earlier searches showed a pattern. First, complaints of back pain and yellowing skin. Later, questions about indigestion, followed by abdominal pain. Individually, those symptoms could mean anything. But when combined, the pattern pointed strongly toward pancreatic cancer. Using nothing but search data, researchers could predict 5 to 15% of future cases without a single medical test. This shows us something important. Data science is not some abstract concept for tech experts. It's a natural extension of how humans have always tried to make sense of the world. Doctors look for patterns in patients. Teachers spot patterns in learning, and grandparents, like Seth's, spot patterns in relationships. The only difference now is scale. Computers can see millions of examples at once, far beyond what any human brain could handle. But here's the catch. Our gut instinct often gets it wrong because it leans too heavily on personal experience. For instance, Seth's grandmother believed that couples with lots of mutual friends had stronger marriages. It made sense to her, because her own circle of friends was close-knit and happy. But when Facebook data was analyzed, it revealed the opposite. Couples with too many shared friends were more likely to break up. Why? Because being surrounded by the same people actually made it harder for relationships to breathe. The lesson is clear. Our guts may be comforting, but data doesn't lie. And sometimes the truth it shows us can be very different from what we expect. Data Reimagined. Back in the 1990s, the Internet was still young, and search engines were clumsy. If you typed Bill Clinton into AltaVista or Metacrawler, chances were you wouldn't land on the president's official page. Instead, you might find yourself on a random site called Bad Clinton Jokes. The results were messy, unreliable, and often useless. Then came Google in 1998, and suddenly everything changed. Search for Bill Clinton, and Google would lead you straight to the official White House page, interviews from respected news outlets, even the correct phone number. It was smarter, cleaner, and, most importantly, more accurate. So what made Google so different? While other search engines simply counted how many times a word appeared on a page, Google looked deeper. It paid attention to links. If the New York Times wrote an article about President Clinton and linked directly to the White House website, Google recognized that as a sign of trust. It wasn't just about the word Clinton being mentioned. It was about who was vouching for it. That subtle shift turned Google into the most powerful search engine in the world. This example teaches us something big. Data isn't just about the obvious numbers in front of us. It's about finding the right signals hidden inside the noise. A link, a pattern, a connection. Sometimes these are far more valuable than the raw facts. Consider the story of EQB, a group of horse racing experts who helped owners select winning racehorses. In 2013, they advised businessman Ahmed Zayat not to sell a horse known simply as Number 85. To others, the horse looked unremarkable. Its family history wasn't particularly impressive, and most experts would have passed on it. But EQB noticed subtle traits in its body: strong muscles, large organs, an unusually powerful heart that signaled greatness. Zayat listened. He renamed the horse American Foro. Just 2 years later, American Foro became a legend, winning the Triple Crown, 3 of the most prestigious races in a single season. The first horse to do it since 1978. The lesson? Like Google, EQB wasn't just looking at the surface. They treated every detail, every measurement of the horse's body as data, and they found meaning where others saw nothing. This same principle applies to us, too. Our words, our conversations, even the way we laugh on a first date, these can all be treated as data. Researchers at Stanford once recorded conversations between speed-dating couples. By analyzing the tone of voices, the range of pitch, and the flow of conversation, they could predict which pairs would go on a second date. It turns out attraction leaves signals in speech. Men laugh more at the jokes of women they like. Women, in turn, soften their tone or talk more about themselves when they feel comfortable. On the other hand, when couples asked too many safe questions like, "Do you have siblings?" it was often a sign of boredom. In other words, data could pick up sparks of chemistry that even the daters themselves couldn't fully explain. So when we think of data, we must expand our imagination. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet, it's links between websites, measurements of a horse's heart, or the way two people lean into a conversation. Data is everywhere, hiding in plain sight, waiting to be recognized. And once you see it that way, the world looks very different. Digital Truth Serum. Back in the 1950s, researchers in Denver wanted to test a simple question. Do people tell the truth in surveys? They asked residents whether they were registered to vote. 83% proudly said yes. But when researchers checked the government records, the real number was just 69%. Even when the surveys were anonymous, people still exaggerated. The same thing happened with questions about charity. 2/3 of people claimed they had recently donated. In reality, only 1/3 actually had. This small study revealed a bigger truth. When asked directly, people lie. Sometimes they lie to make themselves look better, sometimes because they want to fit in, and sometimes because they've even convinced themselves of a false belief. That's why political polls can be so unreliable. In 2016, most surveys gave Donald Trump only a tiny chance of winning the presidency. Yet behind closed doors, many voters who said one thing to pollsters were quietly typing something very different into Google. Roger Tourangeau, a leading social scientist, explains it this way. People lie in surveys for the same reason they lie in everyday conversations. In fact, he says, about 1 out of every 3 things we say to each other isn't completely true, so why would surveys be any different? But here's where big data steps in. Online, when we're alone with our screens, people drop the mask. They reveal secrets they wouldn't admit to a friend or even to themselves. Google searches, in particular, act like a digital truth serum. They strip away the lies because people search for what they genuinely need. Someone with racist thoughts can easily find racist jokes. Someone struggling with anxiety or depression can privately search for symptoms or help. In those moments, honesty wins. Search data even exposes self-deception. Think about voting. You might tell yourself, yes, I'll definitely vote in the next election. But unless you actually search for where the polling station is or when voting begins, the truth is, you probably won't. Google shows the gap between what we say and what we actually do. And sometimes, the truths it uncovers are startling. Take parenthood, for example. Couples without children often worry, will we regret not having kids? That question is searched online all the time. Yet Google data also reveals something surprising. Far more parents search, I regret having kids, than non-parents search, I regret not having kids. The hidden truth is that, while society pressures people into parenthood, regret is more common on the other side. Or consider gender equality. Publicly, Americans take pride in fairness and equal treatment, but Google searches tell another story. Parents are 2.5 times more likely to search, is my son gifted, than is my daughter gifted, even though studies show girls are actually more likely to be academically advanced. Parents also worry far more about their daughters' looks and weight than their sons, even though boys are statistically more likely to be overweight. Google also reveals the darker corners of prejudice. After terrorist attacks, for example, searches targeting Muslims spike with hateful phrases, sometimes as common as people searching for recipes or medical symptoms. When President Obama gave a heartfelt speech urging calm after the San Bernardino shooting, TV networks praised him. But Google searches told a different story. Hateful searches tripled during his address. Behind the applause, Anger boiled online. This is the power of the digital truth serum. It strips away politeness, posturing, and lies, and it shows us how people really think, what they really feel, and what they really fear. The answers are often uncomfortable, but they are real. And once you see them, you can't look at society the same way again. Zooming in. Winston Churchill once said something memorable. A man who is not a liberal at 20 has no heart. A man who is not a conservative at 30 has no brain. His idea was simple. Young people are idealistic. Older people become cautious. But was Churchill right? Does age really make us more conservative? Researchers at Columbia University decided to test it with hard evidence. They studied more than 300,000 surveys collected over 60 years. The result? Age itself had very little effect on whether people leaned liberal or conservative. Growing older didn't automatically change political beliefs, but they did discover something else, something far more powerful. The biggest influence on political views wasn't age, but timing. Specifically, the presidents people grew up with between the ages of 14 and 24 left a lifelong mark. For example, Americans born in 1941 spent their teenage years watching Dwight Eisenhower, a popular Republican president. That entire generation leaned more conservative as a result. Meanwhile, those born a decade later grew up during the rise of John F. Kennedy, one of the most admired Democratic leaders in history. They carried more liberal views well into adulthood. And when that same generation later watched Richard Nixon resign in disgrace after the Watergate scandal, their distrust of Republicans only deepened. In other words, our political compass is often set in youth, and it stays with us, sometimes forever. This is the power of big data. By zooming in on millions of records across different ages, regions, and decades, researchers could see patterns invisible to the naked eye. It's like adjusting a microscope. Suddenly, details come into focus that change the way we understand society. Take crime, for example. In the early 1970s, a controversial film called A Clockwork Orange shocked audiences with violent scenes, including one where the main character sings "Singin' in the Rain" while committing a brutal assault. Soon after, reports surfaced of gangs imitating the crime in real life. The public panicked. Did violent movies cause violent crime? Economists Gordon Dahl and Stefano Della Vigna wanted to know. They gathered big data, FBI crime reports, box office sales, and ratings of movie violence from 1995 to 2004. Then they compared weekends when violent movies dominated theaters with weekends when family-friendly films were on top. The results were astonishing. When violent movies were released, crime actually went down. Why? Because the people most likely to commit violent acts, the young and aggressive, were sitting in dark theaters instead of on the streets. And since theaters don't serve alcohol, a major fuel for violence, even late-night crime dropped. The movies weren't making people violent. They were distracting would-be criminals from drinking and fighting. This is what zooming in with data can do. It reveals counterintuitive truths. Sometimes the answer to society's biggest fears lies not in guesswork or headlines, but in the fine print of millions of tiny data points. Big data. Big Schmata. What it cannot do. By now, it might sound as if big data can do anything. Predict illness, reveal prejudice, even explain politics and crime. But let's be clear, big data also has limits. Seth Stevens Davidowitz once met with Lawrence Summers, former U.S. Treasury Secretary, and a brilliant economist. Summers asked him a question that cuts to the heart of data science. Can big data predict the stock market? After all, if data can uncover so many patterns in society, surely it could also tell us which way the market is heading. The short answer, number. And here's why. The stock market is like a storm with hundreds of shifting winds. Economists call this problem the curse of dimensionality. Too many variables, too many moving parts. If you stare at enough data, you'll always find patterns. But most of them are coincidences. Imagine flipping 1,000 coins every morning and tracking the economy at the same time. By pure chance, maybe coin number 390 always comes up heads when the economy does well. Does that mean coin 390 can predict economic growth? Of course not. It's just noise. The same danger exists when trying to use big data on stock prices. You can always find patterns, but most of them are illusions. Some researchers tried anyway. Teams from Indiana and Manchester universities built programs that scanned millions of tweets to gauge public mood. They claimed that when Twitter showed calm emotions, the Dow Jones Stock Index would rise 6 days later. It sounded promising. Hedge funds even tried to trade using the method. But in the real world, it failed. Why? Because their model was built on too little data, just a few months' worth. And when you're sorting through millions of tweets, it's easy to discover patterns that mean nothing at all. The only real way to test if data models work is with out-of-sample testing, taking your findings into the messy real world and seeing if they still hold up. Without that, big data can fool even the smartest researchers. Seth himself tried. He and Summers once looked at Google searches to see if they could predict investment flows into developing countries. They thought that if people searched things like how to invest in Mexico, maybe that would predict stock growth in Mexican companies. But people rarely searched for those things, so the data wasn't strong enough. They tried another approach, tracking ticker symbols like APPL for Apple. But they quickly realized that search spikes didn't mean future growth. They just meant people were already buying or selling. The data wasn't predictive at all. It was reactive. Finally, they tested searches about gold. They noticed that when searches like how to buy gold increased, gold prices often rose too. But when they tested the theory in real time, it fell apart. The pattern broke and their model failed. The lesson? Big data can reveal many hidden truths, but it cannot do magic. The stock market, with its chaotic mix of politics, psychology, global trade, and chance, is beyond its reach. Some systems are simply too complex, too unstable, and too full of randomness to be predicted by data alone. Big data is powerful, but not all-powerful. Mo data, mo problems. What we shouldn't do. If big data has limits, it also has dangers. The same insights that can help us cure disease or improve society can just as easily be twisted to exploit people. Take hiring, for example. Companies today often check candidates' social media before offering a job. Sometimes it's harmless. They just want to make sure someone isn't openly racist or hostile online. But what happens when companies start digging deeper, using data to judge people based on tiny, irrelevant details? Researchers at Cambridge University and Microsoft once studied Facebook likes. They discovered strange links between what people liked and their intelligence. People who liked Mozart or thunderstorms tended to score higher on IQ tests. People who followed Harley-Davidson motorcycles or certain family pages scored lower. Some of these links were random. Others may have had some truth. But here's the danger. If a company used that data to screen applicants, someone smart could lose a job simply because they liked motorcycles. that's just the beginning. Big data can also drive price discrimination, charging different people different prices for the same product. Airlines already do this. A ticket bought a month in advance is much cheaper than one bought the night before. Why? Because the system knows that last-minute travelers are desperate and therefore willing to pay more. Insurance companies have tested similar models. One firm, Optimal Decisions Group, used doppelganger searches. They compared new customers to old ones with similar income, health, and spending habits, then charged the maximum premium those people were willing to pay. Two people with the same plan might pay very different prices simply because the system knew one of them hated risk and would never walk away. Casinos take it even further. Every gambler has what's called a pain point, the maximum they can lose before they stop playing. Casinos know it's better for business if players lose small amounts regularly rather than big amounts once in a while. So managers sometimes step in before gamblers hit their breaking point, offering free dinners or hotel rooms to keep them coming back. Now imagine if they could use big data to calculate every gambler's pain point perfectly. The control would be total and terrifying. But here's the twist. Big data can also empower consumers. Sites like Yelp let diners expose bad restaurants with honest reviews. A Harvard professor found that just 1 star less on Yelp could cut a restaurant's revenue by nearly 10%. And booking platforms like Booking.com give people the ability to compare hotel prices instantly, reducing the chance of being overcharged. So here lies the challenge. Big data can serve both sides. It can exploit or protect. It can tilt the balance of power toward corporations or toward consumers. The outcome depends on how we choose to use it and whether we demand fairness. Because in the end, the same technology that can manipulate us can also keep the system honest. Conclusion. So, what have we really learned from Everybody Lies? First, the data science is more powerful than our intuition. Human instincts are fragile. They're shaped by small experiences and personal bias. But data can process millions of cases, see patterns we'd never notice, and give us clearer answers. Where our gut feelings often fail, data can lead us closer to the truth. Second, data isn't limited to numbers or charts. It can be anything: links between websites, the measurements of a racehorse's heart, or the words couples use on a date. If you know how to look, almost everything in life can be turned into data. Third, big data reveals truths that people try to hide. In surveys, we lie. In public, we posture. But online, especially in the privacy of a search engine, the truth comes out. That's why Google searches can uncover our hidden fears, desires, prejudices, and regrets, things society often refuses to admit. Fourth, big data lets us zoom in. With enough observations, we can see how specific groups behave, how beliefs form, and how events truly affect us. It can tell us at what age political opinions are shaped, or why violent movies might actually lower crime. These aren't guesses, they're insights born from evidence. But we also learned about the limits. Some systems, like the stock market, are simply too chaotic to predict. Too many moving parts, too much randomness. Big data is powerful, but it's not a crystal ball. And finally, we saw the dangers. In the wrong hands, data can be used to discriminate, manipulate, and exploit. Companies can use it to raise prices unfairly. Casinos can use it to trap gamblers, and employers could misuse it to reject good people. But data can also protect us through transparency, reviews, and accountability. Which side wins depends on how responsibly we use this tool. The message is clear. Big data is not just a scientific curiosity. It's a force that is already reshaping politics, medicine, business, and society itself. It can change the way we live, the way we think, and the way we understand each other. And we're only at the beginning. So as you finish this journey, remember, your searches, your clicks, your digital footprints, they all tell a story. The question is, will we use that story to control people or to create a better world?